So this passage, I think, is kind of interesting because Mary engages Jesus in an incredibly human way. Probably one of the most true interactions that we have in all the stories of the Gospels, I think. Because she believes in him, she trusts him, she knows him, she loves him, but she still confronts him, really. She says to him, "Lord, if you weren't here, my brother wouldn't have died." And I think it's not a far stretch to say that there are many people saying, "Lord, if you had been here, this hurricane wouldn't have hit us." Or, "Lord, if you had been here, we wouldn't have lost power for all these days, or the Jersey Shore wouldn't have been swept away, or all these people wouldn't have died, and people lost their houses." I think if Mary was here with us, she might even say, "Lord, if you were here, all the tragedies of these people's lives and the burdens they carry around and the shame they feel, that wouldn't happen if you were here." I mean, basically what they're saying, or what Mary's saying, is, where were you? Because obviously you weren't here. And I think on weeks like this, that's a pretty human question to ask. Where were you, Jesus? Where is God in the midst of this? How could God allow this to happen? Why me? I mean, these are all true questions we all ask, right? I remembered this thing last week at the Spooky Supper. I was talking with Bill Quinn, and I don't know why this popped into my head, but it was right before the storm was about to hit, and I remembered back on Saturday Night Live, probably 20 years ago, they had these kind of funny poems that they'd play on the screen. Deep Thoughts by Jack Handy. And one was, when a child asks why it's raining, a good thing to tell them is that it's because God is crying. And when they ask why God is crying, it's a good thing to tell them it's probably because of something you did. It's ridiculous, but we believe that, though, don't we? I mean, I saw this woman who was on TV with her, I think, son, and they were interviewing her. She was from Staten Island, and she said, 2 years ago, my house burned down, and here I am, I moved in with my family, and now we lost everything again. Why does this always seem to happen to me? What did I do to deserve this? And it's a very human reaction and question. But I think the promise that we're given, especially in these passages we've just read, it's not that we're not going to face hardship, and it's not that we're going to get off free because we're believers or the saints of God. It's actually kind of the opposite. I mean, if you read enough Bible stories, people are going through turmoil all the time. And what it is it's their faith that carries them through that. And it's the promises that God gives, especially today, which is kind of interesting that it's All Saints Day. That God's ultimate purpose is restoration in the world, and that we get to be a part of that. That we're actually invited to be a part of that. I think of this passage in particular, what happens. Jesus arrives on the scene, and Mary asks him that question, where were you? Where is God in this? Why is this happening to me? She asks those questions. And the thing that stands out immediately is the end of the story, right? I mean, he calls Lazarus out of the grave. Come out! And it's a powerful word that he says. And it's a powerful word he says to all of us. To come out of our grave, come out of our doubts, come out of our chilly homes and make it here. Come out of our sinfulness and our shame, and to be given a new life, be given his life. That's the promise. The other thing that happens that I also think is worth mentioning, because to me I think it's kind of the crux of the matter. I mean, when Jesus meets her, he doesn't either belittle her for asking the question, nor does he try to explain it away either. He doesn't say this is why it happened. I mean, when Jesus goes to the grave, he begins to weep. And he continues to weep. And when Jesus engages this world of ours that we live in, I think where is God in human suffering? Weeping right next to us. I mean, that's what the cross is all about, is that God suffers with us, that we are not abandoned, that he not only understands that, but feels it with us, and that the promise that comes after, that come out promise, is where we get to engage it on an everyday basis. Because that's the third part, which I think is also really cool. It's almost kind of in the subtext of what happens. When Jesus goes to the grave, he tells them to open it. And after Lazarus comes out, he tells them to unbind him. That's our role. That's where we get to join in. We get to loosen the bonds that tie us down. And the ultimate promise that we hear in this Revelation piece is that ultimately there will be no crying and weeping and mourning anymore. That's where we're headed. And in the time between now and then, we carry that promise forward, especially in the way we engage each other. I mean, we remember on a day like today the saints, the people that have died, that we were close to, that we loved and loved us, people that shared the faith with us, and the people throughout the ages who have continued to bring that faith to us in one way or another. And when we think of the saints, I think we tend to think of their holiness seems to stand out. But I think really it's not about their holiness. I think what the saints have, and what their witness is for us, is the ability to turn the question. Because the question isn't, where's God in the midst of this, or why me? But the questions the saints seem to always ask is, now what? Not now what in a cynical way. I've been joking with our kids every time this one particular person comes on the TV, now what are you going to do about these boats on my front yard? That's not the question. The question is, now what can I do? Now who can I help? Now where can I welcome those who are estranged? And as I think about this last week and what that has meant for me, certainly, to just watch and be a part of, I just want to share a couple of those pieces, and then I want to invite others to do the same. So the first part, I think, is just kind of the way we reach out to one another. And we lost power on Monday night, as many people did. And on Tuesday, like many, we kind of crawled out of the Powerless house to see who was around. And it seemed people were everywhere. Got to see neighbors we hadn't seen in a while. Got to see neighbors we didn't even know their names to ask them how they were doing. Got to see, 10, 12 families from church, all in the matter of a couple of days, in ways that usually we're just too busy to do, or we just don't take the time to do. I mean, that's part of it. That's asking that question, now what? Now what can I do, and who can I help, and where can I welcome people? I think there's certainly a part of that is about the hospitality we extend to one another and to others as well. We had some neighborhood kids over at our house during the day in the dark. We had some friends over to eat the cheese out of our refrigerator and share some wine. Many people have been sharing with each other the gift of their power generators or warm showers, and we've certainly benefited from that too. And just to continue to think about those things. Now what can I do? And now where can I engage, and how can I welcome people in? But the other thing that this day gives us, I think in particular, is we have the ability to catch a wider vision, to catch a glimpse of that kingdom that's coming. It's not perfect, and we're not going to see all of it. But there are these little nuggets every once in a while, and I think by being the saints of God, we get to name those when we see them. I remember watching, when I finally got to see some news, there on the Jersey Shore, standing together, was Governor Christie and President Obama. No divisiveness, no campaigning, just doing their job for the people that were there. Certainly, by the end of the newscast, there was just as many political attack ads by everybody. But that is just a nugget. This is how this is supposed to work. And maybe it doesn't always, but we can see it every once in a while. Or when I was in Milford earlier this week, we went down to the shore where there's a bunch of beach homes, and what I saw were people all outside. They had actually brought some like bulldozers in to kind of really excavate the street. And you could see on the houses where the water line was, probably about waist level on me. And doors were open and garages were open and most people's belongings were out on the curb. But it was near the end of the day and people were hugging each other and patting each other on the back. And there were lots of smiles in the midst of all of that loss. I mean, this is what it means. This is one of those now what moments. I saw this little piece on the news yesterday, this pizza company down in lower Manhattan called Uncle Paul's Pizza. Did you see this, Dave? You're nodding. And there are 4 people that work there, including the owner. And they were basically stuck in the city, but they had power. And so for 30 hours straight, they just made pizza. They made like thousands of pizzas. And they were giving them to relief workers and policemen and firefighters and anybody who walked by. I mean, everybody. And they kind of seemed happy about it. I mean, it was, we can do this. This is something we can provide. And they interviewed Dino, the owner of this place, and he said, we're happy to keep doing this, but we need a little help. So if you've got flour or tomatoes or cheese, bring it on down. We'll keep making pizzas. That's the now what question. So now I'm going to do something we don't normally do. I'm going to turn it over to you. Are there other little now what pieces that you've seen? Doesn't have to be a long, elaborate story, but just something that you might have noticed along the way. Anybody got something? Yeah, Mary?
We had several calls asking for okay. The most interesting one was from Karachi, Pakistan.
Really?
Having heard what was going on, and she called.
Cool.
Really local, sorry.
No, well, I'm very grateful to be blessed with this wonderful community of church here. And so when my power came back on, my phone, I've had 28 messages. But before that, I had visitations from pastor and other people, and I'm so grateful that I never felt alone. In fact, it was kind of nice sometimes because there's no TV, there was no phone until the night came. But it was peace. But I thank everyone, and I'm sure everyone feels the same way, that we're really blessed to have this association of people.
There are 4 families at the end of our access road, and all the families seem to respond together, and we're always asking everyone else, how are you doing? Would you like to plug into our generator? You know, and lots of offers like that, and it's really heartwarming to see that.
Anybody else? Yeah,
Not quite on topic, but when I get down or get a little grumpy, I have to remember my son works in Africa. At the worst, we have so much more than those people do every day. They don't have lunch. They don't have electricity. Some of them can go days without eating. No medical help. So I think, why am I grumpy? I got a gas cooktop and a tub full of water to flush the toilet. So that's sort of how I keep going.
Excellent.
We've had offers from 2 families, come to our house, take a shower, eat a meal, whatever you want, our house is open, these 2 people happen to have power. We don't even know them. We do now, but.
Yeah.
I had 2 incidents I just wanted to mention. The one was a call similar to the one from Karachi that was mentioned before, from a fellow who knows me living in China, concerned for my welfare, and saying that they've heard about the disaster that afflicted us and that he was so glad to hear my voice on the telephone because it meant that I was okay. The other was one that you yourself took part in, and that was on your very birthday. You dropped off at our house the needed water that people in a community or a home such as ours with no electricity and well water supply, which means no water at all. What a thoughtful thing. This was great.
Pauline, what?
I was thinking, just driving over here today, you see the caravan of trucks. We just passed a group from Texas, and we from Tennessee are in town. And you think about these question comes up, you know, where was God? Well, he was in, you know, the hearts and minds of these people that I think, you know, came to help us.
Yes. I did too.
Well, the updates that I was getting while we were sitting in the dark were actually from my friend that lives in just outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma. And she was sending me pictures that were on Fox News. And one of them happened to be one of my former neighbors when I used to live in Milford. And the picture is of them in their hot tub. And the water is coming from the ocean, is coming up over the top of their hot tub into their hot tub. And there they are sitting there, and they're trying to make the best of the situation.
Surprise!
So I tried to get in touch with them. Here's the picture. But they actually they stayed at my house while I was in New Canaan for a couple of days. Because I actually had power, and it was like, you know, 5 streets away, so I was in New Canaan. It was open, and luckily we had friends of the family that had brought over a generator, so we were definitely blessed.
In the back, Kirsten.
I was just thinking, Mike and I were talking about how, you know, once we all get our power back and our lives start to return to normal, there's still going to be a lot of people and a lot of agencies helping people that are still very much in need. Just on the Connecticut coast, as you mentioned, people like Bridgeport Rescue Mission, all these agencies. And in the what now category, you know, I think in the weeks and months ahead, we could be thinking about what we could do to help on a wider scale.
Yep. Well, to close, I want to, Peter and Luke have heard this before. When we went to Hammonasset this year, for the last couple of years that I've gone with this church, we've had the ability to do service projects during the day. We're both there too. And this particular year, what we did is our newly elected bishop came and kind of sent us off, Jim Hazelwood. And the thing he did that I'd never seen before that I thought was really great, that I've really been thinking about the last couple of days, is he said to just stop for a moment before you do anything else and just take a look at your hands. You know, look at the fronts of them, the backs of them, and then turn to your neighbor and look at their hands, the fronts and the backs of them, and then join hands. So why don't we do that right now? And what he said to us before we went out to do these projects, which I think is really the cool part, is to say that these are the hands of Christ. This is, you want to ask where God is in the world and in the midst of that, just look at your hands. I mean, this is who we're called to be. To ask that now what question, as we continue to be God's saints in the world, imperfect certainly, but also those called to bring a little glimpse of what this kingdom is all about. Amen.
Amen.